Welcome to Normal Island Live. I'm your host, Lewis Aaron, and I'm joined by the wonderful Curtis Daly. How are we doing?
I am fantastic. I really hope that my internet isn't too slow. Can you hear me fine?
How many times have I told you to get your internet sorted out?
I tried. It's not me. Blame someone else. Anyway, I'm so happy to be here. And how are you, Lewis?
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Everything's fine. The left are winning. The world is great, and we're all moving towards a wonderful, peaceful utopia.
Right. Well, I mean, I feel like that's not happening, but we can dream.
I've been prescribed a new medication, which makes me see everything through rose-tinted glasses. That's what it is.
Maybe let me know where you get that from.
We will move on to our stories. So the stories that we will be discussing tonight. Trump's weird and wild carousel of a cabinet and his White House appointments. It's also been revealed that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his office are under 3 separate investigations, including whether they blackmailed an official who warned them intelligence that was there just hours before the October 7th attack happened. And in the last half of the show, Curtis and I will be discussing if social media should be regulated. And I want to talk about extremism, radicalization, misinformation, and how we move on into the future with the left and how we can win at politics. We will jump onto our first story now. So, we've all seen the news. Trump has started appointing his new wild and weird team and nominating people to cabinet positions and raising many questions and surprising a lot of people. People in cabinet roles will need to be approved by the Senate, but will likely pass with Republicans taking control of the Senate. Let's just go through a quick list of people who have so far been either appointed or nominated. So first we have Secretary of State Marco Rubio, which is equivalent to being the UK Foreign Secretary. He's a climate denier. He scores a 0 out of 100 from the Human Rights Campaign. The Environmental Protection Agency has been appointed by Lee Zeldin, an anti-abortion politician who also voted against gay marriage equality, and has almost no experience relating to the environment, and was quoted after his nomination by Fox News saying that he would prioritize unleashing economic prosperity through the EPA and pursuing an energy dominance approach, aka rolling back environmental protections. Then we have the United Nations ambassador pick, Elise Stefanik, a wild choice with no diplomatic experience. She says that the 2020 election was stolen. She blamed Nancy Pelosi for the January 6th attack on the Capitol, saying that the American people deserve to know the truth, that Nancy Pelosi bears responsibility as Speaker of the House for the tragedy that occurred on January 6th. Yes, okay. Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. I am going to give a trigger warning here. This involves the harm of animals. You may remember this story. But she's most famous for writing her book, No Going Back, where we think, in an attempt to be relatable to country folk, she admitted to murdering her puppy because it was untrainable. She described everything in detail in the book. She said she had failed to train the puppy, and instead of giving it up for adoption, she dragged it to a gravel pit and shot it, and then randomly also killed a family goat. She went into very weird detail when writing this book and described it with absolute glee. This is Donald Trump's administration, but let's get through the next ones quickly. So we have Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee Sanders, a former governor who refuses to call Palestinian territories by their name and calls them by their biblical names, and has explicitly said Palestinian territories belong to Israel. I'm sure we're going to see plenty of peace in the Middle East. CIA Director John Ratcliffe has been appointed, who was previously ranked the second most conservative politician in all of Congress. We have the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. He's made headlines because he is a Fox News host. Yes, a TV show host who is he's a veteran. He also thinks that women shouldn't serve in the military. He has not served in any senior military or political position, has no defense background, and one defense lobbyist was even quoted saying, "Who the fuck is this guy?" Moving on to the next, we have the White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles. She's the first female Chief of Staff, which is an achievement. She is qualified for the role, but was accused of potentially being bribed to stay quiet when Trump was being investigated for mishandling classified documents. Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Stephen Miller, who was deeply tied to Project 2025. No red flags there at all. We have the new border czar, Tom Homan. He is seen as the father of the policy that separates migrant families from their children, and has said that he will conduct immigrant raids on workplaces all across America, something we can all look forward to in the news. The National Security Advisor is Mike Waltz, and the White House counsel has been named as Bill McGinley, but there's nothing really to say about these people. The Middle East envoy, Stephen Witkoff, a millionaire property mogul with no political experience, no diplomatic experience, has never served in office, high or low, and will be expected to broker peace deals in the Middle East without any knowledge or experience in the region. And lastly, onto the one that got the most headlines. The Department of Government Efficiency. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have been appointed to this department. And just in case you missed it, the acronym for the department spells Doge. Yes, Elon Musk has made his new job into a meme, a job which will involve making lots of cuts to government. And if his track record of Twitter slash X, I absolutely hate calling it X, is something to go off, that means getting rid of all the guardrails for safety, getting rid of all the guardrails for accountability that protect people. Okay, that's a big list. So, Curtis, a wild ride. I actually think that potentially these big personalities actually working together directly might cause a lot of issues. I don't know. What do you think of the picks?
I don't think they're going to cause much issues because I don't think there's going to be a clash between these people. They're a bunch of yes people. So the idea that, oh, big personalities, they're all not going to get along because they're all there for their own ideas. They are beholden to the MAGA. Actually, no, I'll rephrase that. They're beholden to the agenda behind Donald Trump, which is Project 2025. That essentially the administration is a basket case of the worst political ideologies. Right, so you've got neoliberalism because they're going to cut taxes for billionaires, they're going to attack trade unions, they're going to implement austerity, of course, with the Doge, a department. It's essentially just going to be like a US version of Milei in Argentina. It's going to be really, really bad for the American people. But you've also got the Christian fascism. So domestically, it's going to be very bad for people. And then you've got the neocons, the neoconservatives. A lot of people think that Donald Trump is this America first guy. Rhetoric, of course, but that's not the case. This is going to be the same old establishment neocons. So you've got a mixture of the three worst things. You've got going to have America, which is still going to get involved with foreign wars. You're going to have an America that is a Christian fundamentalist fascist state. And then, of course, you don't even have economic populism. You're going to have neoliberalism. Okay, let's talk about a couple of them. I mean, Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller is he is probably one of the most extreme picks. I think he said one of the latest Trump rallies is that America is just for Americans. Now, I'm sorry, but that's it's pretty fascist. America, like many nations, is built on immigration, but that signals to people that there should be no immigrants, legal or otherwise. He is extremely, extremely hardline on immigration. I think he was in Trump's administration early on in the first time, and he was behind the Muslim ban. He was behind the zero tolerance policy, which broke families up. And he also purged people within the administration who weren't 100% loyal in the civil service. So he's extreme. Mike Huckabee, an extremely pro-Israel guy. I mean, you demonstrated there that he can't even bring himself to call Palestine. This guy is going to be the hardcore Zionist of the administration. So this idea that J.D. Vance was pushing on the Joe Rogan podcast that Trump is anti-war, he's the peace movement, is a load of crap. And they're going to really upset the MAGA base. Because you heard it from the MAGA people. They were saying this is going to be an administration of peace. I'm sorry, but you've got Mark Rubio, another one. He's a massive neocon. He's a Zionist. He wanted military confrontation with Iran. He supported a coup in Venezuela. You've got Elise Stefanik, you mentioned. She's another hawk. Mike Waltz. I mean, that guy is so horny for a war in China. So essentially, he's lied to his base, just like he did in 2016. He said in 2016, famously, we're going to drain the swamp. We're going to drain the swamp. What did he do? He put a bunch of corrupt billionaires in the cabinet. and warmongers. What's he doing this time? He's told the people, and JD Vance has told the people, this is going to be a different kind of government. This is going to be an American first government. This is going to be no more wars, and Joe Biden ramped up the wars. What's he done? He's filled it with billionaires, corrupt people, and neocons. He is the establishment. People need to get that in their heads. Donald Trump is the establishment, and it's going to be no different to what the establishment wants, which is neoliberalism and essentially a world police state from America. Nothing's changed.
Yeah, what's also funny as well with I've spoken to thousands, literally thousands of Trump supporters online since 2016, and the one thing that they constantly say is that he's peaceful, he had no wars, which when again is technically incorrect in so many different ways, and they forget his destabilizing policy from declaring the Golan Heights that belong to Israel, saying that East Jerusalem is the capital of Israel and moving the American embassy there. He did the strikes on the Iranian, was it the Iranian Guard? I can't remember, but he is massively destabilizing. If we can go back to the Iran deal as well.
People bring up Obama's record, and those of us on the left attack Obama because he was a hawk. He was horrendous foreign policy and many other things. But Trump did more drone strikes in the first couple of years than the entire Obama administration. You mentioned obviously about Israel and declaring that Israel had the capital was Jerusalem, or the capital of Israel is Jerusalem, of massively increasing tensions. And he also ripped up the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, the one good thing that Obama did was to have a deal with Iran where they gave up their nuclear weapons. That's a good thing, and Trump ripped that up. So.
Yeah. There's another angle as well that I kind of want to go with this, is that it's just something I've been thinking about. It's some people, analysts have talked about this for years as well, is that, but going to the EPA guy, I can't even remember his name now because that list was just literally so long. He's going to roll back protections. America, they've always been in this war of being the biggest economic power, always staying ahead, investing in everything from, the chips to AI to loads of other things. I can't see how after 4 years of a Trump administration, how they're gonna even get ahead of countries like China. Americans, especially Trump supporters, they have this notion that China is still a very poor country, that they're very backwards, that they have this. They obviously do have an oppressive government, but they think it is literally like 1984 when there's aspects of it, but it's not quite like the way that they see it. They don't realize that it's a very advanced country and a very wealthy country with amazing infrastructure, trains, transport, all of these types of things, and China is on path to get ahead of America. And the reason I'm bringing up this point is that we've always fought wars for hundreds of years, always resources, and it's usually energy related, right? Whether it's coal, whether it's gas, whether it's oil. Obviously, when we move into the green movement, hopefully we'll get there, that's not going to be the case anymore. It's going to be countries who have independence through green energy, who have all this amazing infrastructure. And what's going to happen to America when they've barely got any trains as it is, when they fall behind the green market? That's, to me, just going to be their economic ending. It's going to put them so far behind that they're going to spend so much time catching up. I don't think Americans realize how much they've kind of shot themselves in the foot, and how, in fact, to be, America the Great, you need to be investing in green energy to compete with people like China.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but you're absolutely right. Energy independence, that's always framed. We get it a lot over here, actually, and especially Reform have been talking about this, which is that energy independence needs to be bring back fracking, or we need to be digging up oil in our own country. Therefore, we're not relying on foreign oil. And obviously what happened with Russia and Ukraine is massively pushed up prices. But obviously, we are undergoing a so-called green movement. At least, I want us to. That's a fantastic way of energy independence. Imagine if our country invested in green infrastructure, in green jobs, and transformed our energy systems to renewables rather than relying on oil. You have no idea the benefits of it. We would be independent from everybody else, but also it will be incredibly cheap. It will get to the point that energy will be free. Obviously, there's a massive pushback from the oil industry, and people like Richard Tice, people like Trump, are all massively in the pocket of big oil. So they have an incentive to push for oil, essentially, because that's a money making machine. The big companies, the oil industry, makes money off of it. There's no money to be made from the green industry, I would say, in 20 to 30 years' time, because it's get to the point where we can have an abundance of energy. Winds, solar. These things are free to us, and they will eventually cost virtually nothing for the consumer. That is fantastic for the public good, not good for the oil industry. And I noticed that's sort of happening over here. I was watching a video from Trump actually earlier talking about China, because he was talking about public transport. He's like, what we need to do is we need to get the very smart guy. I should stop probably doing the Trump impression, but he essentially wants to bring on a lot of entrepreneurs to invest in flying cars. That's what you're saying. He called it air automobiles. It's the same thing. We don't need to do that. We just need to invest in public transport. And who was the worst example of public transport, or using an entrepreneur, shall we say, for getting people from A to B? It's Elon Musk. Right?
Yeah.
Elon Musk built the tunnels, the Tesla,
Hyperloop.
the Hyperloop. Thank you. What a terrible idea. We could just invest in infrastructure and public service. But no, 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 no. We have to make sure that everyone has to have a car. So he tries to compare his administration to what China can do. What he doesn't understand is that China invests in public infrastructure, right? Trump is a neoliberal free market capitalist, and those around him are also that too. They hate the state and they hate public investment. So the idea that he can make America in any way comparable to China is ludicrous, because China will spend billions and billions of dollars on good quality public transport, something that America will never do, which is why they've talked about public transport for so long and they've never delivered. And now they're bringing people like Musk in and, oh, let's leave it to the market. Once again, it's a load of crap. Load of crap.
But yeah, obviously, we are left-leaning, more socialist people at Turn Left. That's what we're about. And obviously, there is an irony of us talking about how these markets are going to compete with each other, because ultimately, we don't like these systems, but obviously, we have to discuss them as they currently exist, and we're currently shackled by them. But my point essentially is that America will not be able to compete if their entire economy relies on oil, and it's as simple as that. They will not be able to compete. If you're a foreign investor wanting to go to open a factory somewhere, whatever it might be, if a country is running off of oil and everybody else is on green energy, it's not going to be competitive.
But that's precisely why sorry to cut you off, but that's precisely why establishment figures. It's precisely why Trump's got members of the cabinet being really hawkish on China, because they know this. They know that China is the West's competitor. They know that China is a lot better at doing things, way better at industry. So instead of thinking of a solution to this and not drumming up war, their solution is, we want to increase tensions with China. I forgot the person's name who I referred to earlier, who I said he's got a boner for for wanting a war with China, because they want to destroy China, because they want to keep the current system, which is dependent on oil. Massive corporations love that, and they want to destroy China, and they want them to not be competitive in the market, which isn't very capitalist of them. It's very, very, very much colonialism, which I suppose colonialism and capitalism sort of work together. But yeah, even if you were to be a traditional capitalist and say, we need to compete in the market, these people need to be screaming green energy, but it's a kind of an oxymoron for them, because they can't use the market mechanism, which is something they so believe in, because once we get to a transition to green renewables, obviously that's not good for capitalists, because they can't make money off it. I suppose we haven't spoken about Elon Musk, but obviously...
Yes, Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. What do you think of that?
Well, first of all, I find it incredibly hilarious, and it's not my joke. I think it was Elizabeth Warren's joke that Musk is head of the Department of Government Efficiency. Was him and Vivek Ramaswamy. So it's not very efficient when you've got two people. That's that liberal joke then and done. But what is so incredibly funny about this is it's a Congo. It is literally a non-government organization. That's it. Trump has basically told Elon Musk and Ramaswamy to fuck off, because the role isn't that Musk has control over an actual department. It's literally just research. It's literally just fuck off for 2 years and come back with suggestions, and maybe I'll take them on board or not. It's so funny how all these people simp for Donald Trump, and he doesn't care about them. I think it's beautiful. to go a bit more serious here and a bit deeper, Elon Musk invests in Dogecoin, right? Why has Elon Musk been pushing this meme that you showed, the Doge meme? Why did he specifically call the Department of Government Energy, the Department of Government, I've lost my words now, efficiency? Why does he call it Doge? It's because he wants to push the value of Doge up. So it just shows this is all such a corrupt game. It's just a billionaire's cabinet.
Yeah,
That is why Musk is there.
I'm not sure how insider trading laws work with cryptocurrency. Obviously, in America, in the UK, in theory, if you have prior knowledge of something and you use that for your financial benefit, that's a federal crime. I don't know if it's
None of
protected
that
with
None of
cryptocurrency.
that matters, though. That's the thing. Now Trump's in power. None of these rules really apply. I mean, Trump's even ignored doing the transition, signing the ethics paper on transition, which is you have to uphold to certain ethics when you're president. He's ignored that from Joe Biden. So a lot of these things that, yeah, okay, fine, it's technically illegal. Do you think they care? No, they don't. I mean, obviously, he can plead, Musk can obviously plead ignorance as well. But I mean, I wholeheartedly believe that is there to push up the value of it so it enriches himself. But the
Yeah.
wider point here, the wider point is this is a cabinet of billionaires, just like last time, with a neocon foreign policy, which is no different than before. I mean, Kyle Kalinske said on Twitter, he nailed it. He said Trump is George Bush with a spray tan. Domestically is more dangerous, but that's that. So again, I bring it back to the MAGA supporters who thought Trump was going to be different. He's played you. He's fooled you. This is complete and utter establishment politics. You've been played.
Also, as well, when it comes to the cuts that they're talking about and the Department of Efficiency, what frustrates me as well is that MAGA supporters have been convinced that the government should be run like a business, which I feel like there is some arguments there. I'm sure there are people of industry who can benefit things, right? We all supported the guy who runs Timpson's into coming to work for our prison system, right? And having that position there because it makes sense because
Right.
he's done so much work there. Stuff like that is fine. But when you've got people who are outwardly saying, like, the government needs to be run like a business, it's not a business. It's essentially, in essence, it's a charity. It's a not-for-profit system. Obviously, you need to get bang for buck. You need to make
Mm.
sure that programs are doing what they're supposed to be doing and departments is doing what they're supposed to be doing. But their theory is that they just want to cut all that back. They're obviously they'll tweet out stuff. I can already see the future where Elon Musk is tweeting out saying, I've identified 2,000 DEI officers across the federal
Mhm.
government and I'm going to be getting rid of them, or something along those lines. But at the end of the day, the government is supposed to provide services to people. So if you're looking at it like a businessman, it's all about profit. It's all about maximizing, the profit of that organization, which doesn't make sense because it's there to provide a service. It is not there to make a profit. And
Yeah.
on top of that,
Anyone that says that the government should be run like a business, you're an idiot, right?
Mhm.
Anyone who says that, ignore them. There's a reason why government isn't business, because business, they have their function in society, but the government isn't there to make a profit. It's there to do a service. I mean, I remember when someone pointed out years ago that in America, the post office doesn't make a profit. And they're like, "Oh, Trump's going to get in and he's going to slash things. He's going to make money again." It's like, you don't want that. I mean, the reason why, and specifically the post
Curtis,
office.
I am very sorry. I've done a very bad thing. I'm in here presenting the show, and I've left my key in the door, and my partner's just got home. So, would you like to rant at the camera for approximately 30 seconds?
Yeah, I will rant at the camera. So the point I was trying to make is that someone said, "Oh, the post office is a non-profit making industry, therefore it's government waste. We should be making money." The reason why that's so stupid is because there are some areas in the country that is very difficult to get to. And if it was run like a business, there would be no incentive for parcels to be delivered in places that is very difficult to get to because they don't see it as a money making thing. In fact, they would lose money in it. That's why you have government services. They're there to lose money in order to provide a service, and that's fine if budgets are in deficit. That often happens in government programs, but but the two things about that is, you can run a budget surplus in other areas of government, and that kind of pays for it, or you just allow things to run on a deficit because the government can handle it. That's why, I mean, small deficits are a thing because it just means you're pumping more money into the private sector. But yeah, anyone that says the government should be run like a business, do not listen to these people. right? They have no clue what they're talking about.
I'm back.
Thanks
Thanks
for
for that.
language.
We will have to move on to the second story because I'm aware I'm conscious of time. But just to let everybody know as well, I'm going to try and do two rounds of comments this show because I'm going to do comments after these two stories, and then after our discussion, hopefully you guys can put some more comments in based off our discussion. But I can only do it if I have enough time. So just to let you guys know, get those comments out there. Okay, on to our second story. So Israel and its government are at it again. Blackmail, tampering, and leaks. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his inner circle are being investigated for multiple acts of potential criminality and misconduct. Okay, so there are three main investigations, and I'm going to quickly try and go through them. So we have case one, the leaking of top secret documents. So this is the most consequential investigation of them all. It involves Alicia Fieldstein, a spokesperson for Netanyahu, and it's been reported that on November 3rd, Fieldstein may have obtained, modified, and leaked classified documents to the foreign press. The purpose, sources have suggested, was to control the public opinion and deflect pressure on Netanyahu to approve a hostage deal, which could have caused friction with his far-right coalition due to potential concessions. Politicians politicking. Israel's security agency, Shin Bet, detained Fieldstein and was initially barred from a meeting with his lawyer. And alongside him, 4 security officials from the IDF's intelligence corps were also arrested. One of them has now been released, but these officials were tasked with safeguarding information. That was their job, but now they are being investigated for leaking information. The contents of the leaked documents remain classified, but they seem to be connected to reports that the German publication Bild and the UK's Jewish Chronicle that they were getting information to leak it to the press. So Bild reported that Hamas was using the hostage situation to intensify divisions within Israel, but with no actual intent to negotiate. And the Jewish Chronicle claimed that some hostages had been smuggled from Gaza into Egypt. I think maybe we might remember some of these storylines. I definitely do, but now it all seems to start making sense. Netanyahu later cited these reports to justify a continued Israeli military presence along the Philadelphia corridor in the Gaza-Egypt border, despite security officials specifically stating that they had no evidence to substantiate these claims. The leaked reports created ripples of mistrust, questioning the legitimacy and the timing of the disclosures. So that's the first case. Quickly moving on to the second one, but they are all maybe connected. Tampering with protocols. So, on November 7th, a second investigation has emerged focusing on allegations that members of Netanyahu's team tampered with official protocols of crucial meetings in the early days of the war. So, the report suggests that Netanyahu's aides may have altered records of national security and war cabinet meetings, potentially to align them with a favorable narrative to obscure sensitive details. Notably, these meetings were allegedly shifted from IDF headquarters, where records are automatic, to the Prime Minister's office, where documentation may be less stringent. So this inquiry followed earlier. Apologies. The inquiry followed suspicions raised in July by Avi Gil, Netanyahu's former military secretary, who reportedly noted discrepancies between actual discussions and official records. Some of these meetings, sources suggest, might have involved high-level discussions relevant to Israel's cases at the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. Netanyahu's team has denied the tampering of allegations, asserting that all meetings were recorded per protocol. Yeah, like we believe you, Benji. However, a recent request by Netanyahu's chief of staff to access older classified records has raised suspicions about the efforts to revise the record on Netanyahu's handling of wartime decisions. For me, the next one is the big one. This is the third case that they are being investigated for, and it involves blackmail. So this is more shadowy in nature and involves a senior Netanyahu aide allegedly using sensitive personal footage to blackmail a high-ranking IDF officer. So the reports come from channels 11 and 12 in Israel, suggesting that the footage was used to exploit and extract classified information from this officer. But then this links to another scandal, because what's more incredible about this story is that that same officer who may have been blackmailed for another reason, is the same officer who actually received intelligence a few hours before Hamas attacked on October 7th. So a large number of Israeli SIM cards were activated in Gaza, and the officer in question knew this hours before the attack. These SIM cards were used by Hamas to communicate with each other once they entered Israel from the Gaza border, and it's widely known that Israel has used cell phone and SIM card tracking technology to monitor people in Gaza for years. And the activation of this size would indicate a probable attack. So why didn't Netanyahu do anything? This is what we don't know, and this is what's been investigated. Their defense is that the activation was to be discussed the next day. But what is also being speculated by Israeli journalists is that Netanyahu is trying to cover his back and is possibly blackmailing this officer to not reveal Netanyahu's incompetence. But two main questions remain. First, are all these cases connected? The alleged blackmail in the case could have been a way to access classified information involved in case 1, while tampering in case 2 could be an effort to cover up the leak. Second, was Netanyahu aware or ever involved in any of these actions? With this, he's literally on trial for bribery and breach of trust. He has a court date which is approaching on December the 2nd. So he has a precedent to do all of this. And any connection to any of these new cases could amplify his current legal troubles. So whether this is a series of rogue actions by aides or an orchestrated effort with his knowledge will remain a mystery for now. As these investigations unfold, the fallout could be significant, potentially leading to criminal indictments and reshaping Israel's political landscape. But the allegations underscore an atmosphere of secrecy and maneuvering in Netanyahu's administration, raising pressing questions about the accountability in a time of national crisis. Curtis, a lot to take in. I'm just going to throw it at you. What do you think of all of this?
I mean, these are explosive. What's come out of these reports really, really are. Of course, this is going to create a whole environment of some theories. Did Benjamin Netanyahu know about October 7th and allowed it to happen? I think I'll comment that in a minute. What I will say is, and I covered this a long time ago, I think it was an article written by the New York Post 6 months ago, which talked about how Israel knew about the 7th of October a year in advance. However, in that article, it didn't say they knew the exact plans, they knew it was going to happen on this day, and they were going to allow it to happen. But rather, there were lower level IDF soldiers who suspected that Hamas were gearing towards an attack. They even saw, or they witnessed certain training exercises, and they wanted to relay it to higher members of the IDF, and they were ignored. And actually, it was complicity, or it was overconfidence, it was arrogance, and it was actually a little bit of sexism in there, because a lot of these lower level IDF soldiers are women. That led to essentially this being ignored. So the article essentially said they could have stopped it, or they could have intervened or done something, but it wasn't specifically, it was known at the top of the government. So what do I say about now? I mean, that's essentially my view, because we all know, everyone watching, it's very, very clear that Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli Zionist project absolutely benefits from October 7th. It's kind of hard to deny. I don't know. I don't know whether Netanyahu specifically knew or not, but it's going to get harder and harder to say that's not the case when we literally have leaked reports coming out now saying he may have known, or he had some information and then didn't do anything about it, then tried to blackmail people. I mean, it's not a good look. I'm sure there will be many people who will say, it's definitely something that was allowed to happen.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No. Sorry, I cut you off.
I was just going to say, I think for me, there's three possible options here. The first one is they're just grossly incompetent, and now they're trying to backtrack and cover their tracks. Is it possible? People have speculated about, Benjamin Netanyahu spending so much time trying to stay in power that he's probably just making lots of mistakes, and now he's trying to cover his tracks, which is why he won't agree to an investigation and a committee into October 7th until the war is over. But if he keeps the war going, he'll never be investigated, right? And then the second option is that they knew this was coming, and maybe they wanted it to happen, but not to the extent that it did happen. Maybe they wanted a scenario where Hamas have tried to potentially invade. And again, this is pure speculation.
Hmm.
And then the third one is they knew how big it was, they knew how bad it was, and they wanted this to happen. I think kind of where I still stand, because I'm not a fan of conspiracy, and I'm not accusing anybody of peddling conspiracy, because there's lots of evidence that they knew it was going to happen. I do still lean on the complete incompetence side.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'm a person
Well,
who just
I don't.
needs. Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
not
Go ahead.
sure. Well, I'm not sure if I can buy into the incompetence because Israel has very comprehensive intelligence services. They have very good technology, so I find it hard to believe that there's incompetence. Obviously, you can have the best technology in the world; it's the decisions behind it. I'm not sure if I can put it down to that. I think it could be more in the second camp, which is essentially they knew there was an attack that was going to happen. They didn't know it was going to be a lot of innocent people being killed, but it was just going to be like a couple of rockets. And they underestimated Hamas's quite quite a comprehensive plan, and I don't think they knew how much damage Hamas was going to do. So I think it's possibly that there was some kind of attack that was incoming. Again, they probably didn't know all the details, or they certainly wouldn't know all the details of it. And they allowed it to happen because, of course, this is very good for the Zionist project. Netanyahu absolutely needs this war to happen, and he wants to drag it out because it further sort of solidifies his position. But I'm actually going to discount the word conspiracy now. I think I would have said beforehand, before this information come out, that it would probably still be a conspiracy theory to say that the Israeli government knew this was going to happen, allowed it to happen. I'm just going to downgrade it to a theory because, I mean, for me, what I consider conspiracy theory is who benefits, right? So when people say the Earth is flat, I say, well, that's a complete utter conspiracy theory because you don't even know who benefits from that. And people say, oh, it's about control. I mean, it's not good enough for me. That's a blatant conspiracy theory. This, though, I mean, it's not entirely at the realms of possibility that a genocidal monster like Benjamin Netanyahu would allow for his own citizens to be murdered. I would not put that past him. So I am going to downgrade it to theory, but it's still a theory because we don't have confirmation. But regardless, in all three scenarios, whether it was incompetence, whether it was they kind of knew there was some sort of attack happening, or they fully knew, one thing is consistent, and that is they put the danger of Israeli citizens at the forefront. They never cared about the Israeli people. That in fact, Israeli people dying is very good for them because they can justify the genocide against the Palestinians. So where do we go from here? I think with Netanyahu, what worries me is, look, Netanyahu could actually go. I mean,
Yeah, that's possible.
it sparked protests when he fired Yoav Gallant, the chief military personnel guy. It sparked protests, and there were people who, by the way, aren't anti-Zionists or against what Israel's been doing against the Palestinians, but people protested specifically Benjamin Netanyahu. They think he's gone too far. And I think the consensus is to replace Netanyahu with a so-called moderate, someone who's still going to continue the genocide, someone who's still a big, massive Zionist, because, I mean, there's no anti-Zionist in Israeli government, not really. And actually the continuation of the apartheid regime is going to continue. It's just that specifically Benjamin Netanyahu may go. I think that the firing, we discussed this on another show with Kevin Logan, the firing of Yoav Gallant was probably specifically timed for Donald Trump's win. Because I think, and this is obviously just reaching into the alternate timeline here, but had the Democrats won the election and Netanyahu fired Yoav Gallant, which might not have happened because of the Democrats winning, but had that happened, there was a slight window of opportunity to undermine Israel's efforts of what they're doing. I mean,
Yeah.
be clear here, Biden is a massive Zionist. He doesn't care about the Palestinian people, nor does anyone in the Democratic Party. But unlike Trump and the Republicans, they still don't want the genocide to happen. And the reason why is because they feel incredibly embarrassed by Israel, because it's hard to say to the American people, we believe in freedom and democracy and peace, whilst also trying to apologize for what Israel's doing. So they are opposing the war basically to save face. And I think had there been more pressure on Netanyahu to go and had Harris become president, there could have been a slight window of opportunity to dispose of Netanyahu somehow and disrupt the excesses of the Zionist regime Obviously, that's not the timeline we live in. The timeline is Trump is a fascist. He absolutely supports killing all Palestinians. So do people in his cabinet. And
And
whether
his
Netanyahu
voters.
goes or not, exactly, whether Netanyahu goes or not, the same thing's going to happen. So it's a mess. It's a real mess. We don't know what's really going to come of it. Nothing good. It just means that if Netanyahu does go, you're going to have a more muted leader who in policy won't change much what Netanyahu's doing, but in terms of comms might be more muted, might pretend to be the nut. But I think what this does is show even more to the wider public of how much of a monster and a genocidal piece of shit Netanyahu is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the US stuff, like I have no idea what's going to come now with Trump in power. Just to remind everybody, in 2019, when under the Trump administration, I can't get my words out today. The Trump administration, they sanctioned the previous ICC prosecutor, like with no reason, literally no reason. They had no justification for it, and they sanctioned her, which would effectively, block some of her money, stop her from traveling to certain places. And I suspect within a week or two after January 20th, when Trump's inaugurated, the same thing is going to happen. Some bad things are going to happen in the Middle East over the next few years, and it's going to be very, very sad. But all we can do is keep trying to stand up for the Palestinians, keep trying to work towards whatever the solution is going to be, which is ultimately up to the Palestinians, and then work towards holding our own governments accountable. The pressure does work, and not to a point of absolute solution, but we've seen people move, not to anywhere that we want them to be, but we are seeing people move. And if we could even organize slightly better, I feel like we could apply more pressure and make some progress too, which eventually, many European countries have moved on this issue. I'm seeing a potential split in the future, maybe where the US and Europe could have some very bad relations if Europe goes more towards sanctioning Israel, sanctioning the prime minister, going after Smotrich,
I do
Ben-Gvir.
know that. I
I don't
mean,
know.
Musk.
Am I being too optimistic?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it's possible for splits. I mean, you've got Musk, who is very unhappy with Europe at the moment because the European Union wants to curtail his power. They're looking at possibly censoring Twitter in some European nations or within the EU. Of course, Musk doesn't like that. Musk, being quite a powerful figurehead in the Trump administration, is obviously going to put a lot of strain on that. You know how Musk responded to when was it Brazil who
Oh, the judge.
yeah, the judge who censored Twitter, and the guy went on a massive, crazy, insane rant. I mean, really weird stuff. How he was making AI memes of putting him in jail. Really, really insane. We know how emotional Musk is, like a child. If the EU were to do something like that, that would obviously cause tensions. I would be very interested in how the geopolitical picture looks. I mean, I don't expect the EU to start siding with BRICS or anything. I don't think that's going to happen. In
Mm,
fact, we could probably have a trifecta of geopolitical lines. You've got
yeah.
BRICS, you've got the European Union, and then you've got I call it the West. Now, this is the thing: the West and Europe are kind of the same thing. But let's be honest, when we talk about the West, we're talking about the USA, aren't we? So essentially, the US and then Britain. Well, let's be honest, we're going to side with the US. So it's going to be US and the Allies, possibly the European Union in the middle, and then you've got BRICS and China or that on the other side. It's going to be very complicated. Again, it's a mess, and the Trump administration is only going to make the world far less stable.
Absolutely. But we will have to move on so we can have plenty of time for our discussion next. However, we're going to quickly do our lovely pitch to you guys. So before we move on, if you are enjoying this live, and make sure you hit the like button and all that lovely cheesy stuff that people hate asking people to do, but I really want you to do it. It's great for the algorithm, and you can also please just share our content, let people know about Turn Left. You can also support us financially by heading over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, where you can donate to us either monthly or a one-off donation. Our goal is one day to be a paid organization where we work and grow into a full-blown media organization. That is our dream. So thank you for whatever support you can offer in the meantime. Now, instead of talking about necessarily a news story, but we'll be talking about news, I want to talk about social media. In light of obviously what's happened in the US, in light of things that have been happening all around the world, here in the UK, everything from Southport, I want to talk about whether social media should be regulated, and especially like in the comment section. Oh, speaking of the comment section, I realized I just missed it. But you know what we'll do instead? We will do all the comments towards the end after the discussion, because I'm really interested to see what everybody thinks about what we've talked about and the discussion that we're about to have. Apologies for mixing up the schedule. But yeah, so should social media be regulated? We've got so much misinformation, disinformation. People are being radicalized in front of us. I've got family members who are radicalized. People are turning into extremists. When the newspapers became big, they eventually had to become regulated. The media is no longer the mainstream media. Mainstream media is social media. It is the biggest player, and it should be regulated. The way it currently works in most countries is that if you're a media organization, and you print something, if you publish something, you are liable for that. Whether it's your guest, whether it's the hosts, whether it's the editors, the company is liable for what they're putting out. That is not necessarily the same for social media. We did recently see in France that the CEO of Telegram did get held accountable for not moderating his website correctly, which is slightly different than, we can't arrest Elon Musk if somebody puts out the Southport tweets, right? He can't be arrested for that or held accountable for that under the current laws. But I am moving more towards a place where social media companies should be held accountable, and they should be able to demonstrate that they are actively getting rid of known misinformation, putting things in place that are going to stop radicalizing people. But what do we do when we've got people like Elon Musk at the top, literally sharing the wildest conspiracy theories? I still don't understand to this day why Nancy Pelosi still didn't sue, and her husband sue Elon Musk for retweeting and pushing out a conspiracy theory that a MAGA supporter did not, in fact, attack her husband in her home with a hammer, but it was actually his secret gay lover. I still don't understand to this day why they didn't sue, but that would be them suing Elon Musk, not necessarily the platform. I think we need to move more towards holding platforms legally accountable for the content that is on there. But obviously, we've got Elon Musk pushing this idea of citizen journalism, yet we don't really have any good citizen journalists. They don't corroborate anything. These people aren't out in the field. They're just making posts online. They're essentially just like pundits. They're not journalists. Maybe I'd like to see some stuff come in where if you are a social media account and you're putting information out there, there should be maybe a legal obligation that that individual has to reveal their identity. So they have to be held accountable. I don't necessarily have the exact fix or the exact solution, but I'd love to know if anybody disagrees with this. And of course, Curtis, what are your general thoughts?
I don't think you can rein in power from these big corporations. I don't think you can regulate them and hold them to account, frankly. Of course, would I support legislation that does? Yeah, but we have to be real here. They are far too powerful. And just before we get on to that sort of part of the conversation, I see this narrative being played, which is that legacy media is dying, and this is now the age of new media. I mean, I used to say that. I think I reject that now because legacy media hasn't died; it's just transformed. I mean, all right, Elon Musk isn't legacy media. He rallies against legacy media. So do we at Turn Left. But these media platforms that have existed for so long haven't died and disappeared. They're going into social media. What do I mean by that? Well, okay, let's look at YouTube, for example. Over the years, the way the algorithm has worked, it started off as a genuine sort of alternative, a genuine social media platform. And remember the days when it was just people posting videos of people going to the zoo? That was what YouTube was. Now it's because it's turned into an algorithm that needs to be a profit-making algorithm. It's geared towards profit-making, profit-seeking, and mainstream outlets like the BBC, like MSNBC, CNN, all these big corporate media, the legacy media, have all jumped onto social media, and they're getting boosted by the algorithm. I mean, they don't put out very good content. I mean, some of the journalism, I guess, is okay, but they don't. It's like unique content that serves that deserves to get so many views. Yet, because they have the power behind them, they've co-opted social media to embolden themselves. So I think I reject the idea that legacy media is dying. Legacy media is just latched onto a new platform, which is social media. However, What's happening is a new media is coinciding, but that's not the new media like turn left or socialist media or anything like that. This new media is the media of capital. Now, I would argue, obviously, mainstream media and corporate media is capital too, but we've got a second version, which is way more overt and it's way more. I mean, before you'd have sort of editorial decisions to be made that favors capital. Now you've got billionaires owning platforms and just straight up saying, I'm a billionaire and this is what I believe. It's way more extreme. It's like the worst excesses of legacy media rolled into a social media platform. So let's talk about regulation. I don't think you can regulate these guys. You can't take on the power of Donald Trump. I mean, what can you? You're absolutely right. Like, how would you even go about it? What, do you hold Donald Trump accountable for every tweet that's put out? I don't think that's particularly a good idea. You could probably say, well, okay, we need to hold him accountable because his moderation isn't very good. What are you going to do? Fine him? The guy's the richest man in the world. A fine for a rich person is essentially you can do it. What are you going to arrest him? Well, currently he's the real VP, as some like to call him, in the White House. And at the end of the day, global corporations and billionaires always lobby the government to make laws favorable to them. So I don't think there's any way you can really change social media for the better in terms of regulation. The big question is ownership. That's the important thing. We need to radically change the ownership of our media. That means no more single billionaires owning networks, owning social media platforms. I mean, my God, apparently there's stories going around that Elon Musk wants to buy Comcast. So it's another influence of billionaires. What we need to do is radically transform ownership, and that means ownership to the people. We need to take power away from the corporations, and we need to democratize it. Now, that's a very difficult thing to do. There's already been moves to do this. Platforms such as Mastodon, is a decentralized platform where it's not just some company owning it, but you kind of have this sort of universe of networks, and within the networks you've got mini servers, and anyone can start their own server, and within that server you've got your own terms of service, you've got your own rules, and essentially if you want to join that universe, you kind of got to adhere to the rules. It's very more like localized, kind of like what the internet kind of used to be in the early stages, what social media and the internet was promised before it was taken up by corporations. But that's also very hard to do because there's no money in it. And of course, those that are starting up Mastodon servers or trying to build a democratic media are doing it voluntarily around their full-time work, which is incredibly difficult to do. It's predicated on volunteers. So we have to figure out a way how we can get capital to platforms such as Mastodon to people, almost like paying people to start up democratic media. And that can be done through the government. A possible, not an alternative, but another way, and I think Cog spoke about this on his last show, which is nationalization. I think there at least should be a conversation of nationalizing social media. Now, of course, that brings up a lot of issues. Some will say, okay, government-owned social media, that's authoritarianism, whilst also forgetting that corporate authoritarianism. Oh my God, corporate authoritarianism exists as well. It's kind of like saying, .gov, oh bad, but .com, absolutely fine. There is obviously accountability within governments, possibly, and also I think actually the politicians that we don't expect, like the Keir Starmers of the world, like the so-called liberals and grown-ups in the room, I think they may even start to support nationalization of social media. I mean, again, this is the point that Cog made on his last show. Could you imagine politicians accepting social media companies pushing out AI videos where, I don't know, Keir Starmer's killed someone in the street and people start believing it? It's going to get, I mean, you're already seeing AI with some of the powerful content that gets put out that fools a lot of people. It's only going to get worse. And you're going to have politicians thinking, we can't have that. That really disrupts the democratic process. So even like the worst politicians might even support moves to possibly nationalizing these media platforms. But it's a very difficult thing. There's no silver bullet. I don't even know if I have the right answers. It's a conversation we need to have, but it's unsustainable with the current model.
I think, I'm not talking about necessarily, if somebody puts something out that's false, that you're able to go after them, unless obviously it's something that they're liable for, right? Like accusing somebody of doing something that they haven't, that's already protected by an individual. But I do think there are means that we can go about in terms of You know, like how companies have to by law do certain things to demonstrate, you know, whether it's like they're reducing the amount of slavery in their supply chains, whether it's the gender pay gap, they're forced to publish reports, any of these
Mm,
types of things. I think we could use other levers in the meantime. Like, I'm all up for talking about, you know, democratizing and decentralizing different parts of social media, but I think that's a few steps ahead. I don't think that's something that could
yeah.
easily happen. However, what we could do in the meantime is still hold companies accountable for the amount of extremists and the disinformation, the misinformation out there, by fining them. You know, Facebook have been fined quite a few times, into the billions, by the EU for various things, nothing necessarily to do with like misinformation, disinformation. And obviously, there's difficult questions about who's the arbiter of the truth, right? Because there are things out there that have been put out into the world which haven't been proven, but have then been proven. So obviously, at one point, it was either a conspiracy theory which had no legs to something that ultimately became true. I don't necessarily have the right solution, but where we're at right now, especially with a platform like Twitter, um, on Saturday, I was it Sunday? Saturday? I can't remember which day it was. I went down to the South Bank in London, just went for a walk, and I saw on the news that there was a stabbing not too far away from us. And it said that the guy was still at large. So I just quickly went on Twitter, searched stabbing London, sorted by latest, just to see if I could see any more information. And all the pages that came up were migrant invasion. A Stephen Yaxley Lennon popped up. All these insane accounts who were telling anybody who was searching just like me that this person was a migrant, they were an asylum seeker, this is the cultural enrichment of the UK. And this is what I'm talking about when it comes to the radicalization that people are going through right now. Because even though, you know, myself, I wouldn't believe that, I'd need to see more evidence, I'd need to see more reliable information. And at this point, by the way, there was no information about this person. There was nothing on this person's identity. There were no photos. There were no videos. They just jumped to that conclusion. Just another version of Southport, but obviously without the same scale. But this is exactly what happens. And what has happened is that people, it's the Steve Bannon approach, essentially. Flood the zone. Just keep flooding the zone. Just keep flooding it. Just keep saying it over and over and over again. And we've seen people become radicalized. Obviously, what's concerned me the most is, you know, last week we've now, not we, but, you know, the USA have elected a president who I'm not even going to list. They've elected Donald Trump, and most of that is because a lot of these people listen to, obviously, certain versions of extreme media, but a lot of these people are online just getting these insane conspiracy theories and being radicalized. And I feel like if we don't take action now, we're heading for a very, very dark place.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the one thing to counteract that, and it's never going to be asymmetrical because when you're up against loud voices and big money, it's very difficult. But you know, almost take the Steve Bannon approach, flood it. You know, there are calls to say people should be leaving platforms. It's obviously entirely up to them, and also I understand if you personally want to leave some platforms because it's very bad for your mental health.
I don't know
But
if you
I'm
saw, by the way, today the Guardian have left Twitter.
They have, yeah, and I
Yeah,
did see that, and I thought, well, to be honest, I mean, the Guardian are so ineffective. What I think, and I saw Aaron Bastani say it, and he said, look, the best return on investment is YouTube, and I think that's where YouTube is still a good platform. It is still dominated by the right, but it's a place where the left can still engage effectively. But I do think the left should be in all spaces because at the end of the day, if you leave the stage, it's just going to be filled by the right. So I would encourage people to try and stay on Twitter. But if you want to go, I completely understand it. I also understand the point you're making that looking at democratizing the media is a couple of steps ahead. What can we do in the meantime? But my view is I don't know how we can even effectively make these small incremental changes because it is insanely corrupt and capital is just far too powerful. But I don't want to sound like this is not a doomer take, by the way. I'm just saying
we
that we need a
regulated
more.
the mainstream media. I'm just saying, just
Well, I
saying.
mean, we have, but like the things with the mainstream media is it never was captured by capital that much. In fact, capital got in bed with media after regulation. I mean, it was the Rupert Murdoch of the 80s. He sort of revolutionized the media, made it into more infotainment, obviously pushed a lot of propaganda. But you know, there was before then there was at least good quality journalism, I think, in some corners of the mainstream media, especially in Britain. That was regulated, and then a lot of capital joined in anyway. So regulation doesn't stop a lot of propaganda. Regulation's good. I think having Ofcom and certain regulatory bodies like Impress are important. But again, how are you going to slap that on social media? I don't know, but I'm not here to give the answers because it is such a difficult thing to take on. I mean, you are
Well,
taking on the most powerful people in the entire world.
why don't we see if our lovely audience has got any answers? I know our producers had to dip out just for a few minutes because I've overran. But Curtis, do you have access to the comment section to get those?
I do. I'm going to do that. I don't think anything was starred, and I think we're having trouble with our comment section because the last comment came in at 35 minutes, but I could probably read it off my phone.
Are
Because
you
this
looking
is
at the private comments?
no, I'm on the main comments. Off to make a coffee and a ciggy. So if the show finishes, thanks Lewis and Curtis. Great discussion. That's from Jacqueline. This is really professional stuff. Okay.
Yeah, I can't
So
highlight comments when I'm hosting.
from Jacqueline, CNN have had huge viewership losses in 2016. They had over 50 million views. In 2024, the viewership dropped to less than 6 million, according to some Indian news channels. I mean, from that, though, that is because more people consume online media. That doesn't necessarily, I mean, obviously, that is a danger to CNN, but CNN are still an online presence. But that's just the rise of the internet, I guess.
Isn't the guy who's running CNN now like the former head of the Telegraph or something? Like he's some big right winger.
I mean, they're all right wing. There's not a left wing. There isn't a left wing media owner out there, despite what some of the right say. I mean, there isn't. The EU took on Microsoft. Brazil made him back down. Musk has limits. That's from SFM. Is the dog?
That's true. He did actually back down on that.
Sorry.
He did actually back down on
Yeah, he
Brazil.
did.
He
He
put
did
up a
back.
big show and fight, and then did eventually back down.
I mean, maybe I'm poo-pooing too much on the power of regulations and on what the EU can do because that is true. I mean, Musk was he had a tantrum about that judge.
But if you just zoom out for a second, right, I think Musk is going to be the biggest driver towards regulation. Not only has Elon Musk attacked judges now in the UK, Brazil, and Italy, in fact, he has obviously attacked world leaders. He is having showdowns with world leaders. Oh, well, most of them not replying to him. He's gone after Hamza Youssef when he was the first minister in Scotland. Obviously, gone after Keir Starmer. Like, there's a difference between criticizing a leader, but he's literally going after their throats. And I just feel like I feel like the EU is going to pull something out of their hat in the next couple of years. I really do.
Yeah, I'm gonna look. Yeah, maybe there is some power in some sort of regulation, which isn't going to transform much. But that is with the EU though. There's nothing the US. First of all, there's nothing the US is going to do because Trump has captured the state. We don't know if there's even going to be a free and fair election in 2028. Britain. All right, Keir Starmer's in charge at the moment, and I know that he doesn't like Elon Musk. But I'm not sure if Labour are going to be in power for that long. I mean, I'm worried about the rise of Reform. And if Reform get in, they're massive Musk simps. So I don't see anything from the US or the UK, possibly the EU. What jurisdiction they have is only inside the EU. So they may have some successes within their own borders. But when it comes to the UK and the US, I mean, we've got no hope. not anything short term. Which is why we need to really start looking at building community and networks that can take on capital, which is going to be very, very difficult. But also, we need to look at maybe start going offline again, doing some community organizing, because at the end of the day, the right completely has monopolized the internet, which is depressing. But they haven't monopolized real life yet. And I think that we need to start sort of merging progressive online spaces with the real world. Go out and touch some grass and speak to people. Do some more events. Speak to, I mean, I know that actually what's interesting is Reform are going around to community hubs and they're giving them, they're helping them fill out benefit forms and stuff.
Yeah.
Shit about those people. But that is incredibly effective. The left needs to be doing that too. And that's where you can start to reach people. Of course, we have a problem with young men who are swinging to the right. That's something that needs to be tackled. But I think we need to have a hybrid between the online space and the physical space, because if we're just going to try and use social media, I mean, I don't think we're going to be that successful.
I just want to quickly respond to Flow Snake, cool name. Who gets to decide what an extremist is? And yes, Lewis, who gets to decide what the truth is? It's not a difficult problem; it's a huge problem, and one which probably needs to be solved. I want to quickly clarify, like the idea behind like what happens actually in the media versus social media. Just I want to quickly clarify it. So, a newspaper will never allow somebody like what's his name, like Stephen Yahtzee Lennon. You will never see an opinion piece in the Daily Mail or even the Guardian from Stephen Yahtzee Lennon, because they know something that he could put in there would be so libelous and so insane that it would affect their platform and would allow them to get sued. Because if they platformed him, the newspaper gets sued. So it's not necessarily about deciding exactly who the extremist is. It's about moving some of the liability to the provider. So, for example, if Stephen Yahtzee Lennon is on Twitter, if somebody sues him for something that he says on Twitter, I would move some of the liability over to Twitter as well. So they would be incentivized not to platform these people. And that would then be across the board, because I'm capable of being libelous as well. So they might want to platform me if I'm a libelous person. And that's what happens in the mainstream media. And it's been like that for decades. And it's like that in almost every country. So I want to move some of that responsibility to the platform so they can make good decisions about who they're platforming, whether it's extreme, left-wing anarchists all the way to extreme right-wing fascist people. They would be
I,
incentivized to get rid of and not platform certain people.
I
So
do want to
it's
bring
up to the platforms, essentially.
I do want to bring up one comment from Jay, and he's made a very good point. And he says that Sky News story on Ajax and Maccabi Tel Aviv, a triumph of regulation, and he follows it up with any new regulations will be aimed at criminalising the left, liberalism using fascism as its militia. And actually, what we've seen through the rise of just complete misinformation has also affected the mainstream media. The mainstream media has changed over time, and that's become look. It's always had its biases. It's always had its structural biases. There's always been critiques of the mainstream media, but there has been a change where the mainstream media does literally push out like Elon Musk style lies, and the Amsterdam story is a perfect example of that. That wasn't just the way they frame this is a bit biased. That was pure misinformation to the extent when Sky News initially reported on it, it showed a far more balanced view of what happened. It names the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans as being thugs. They pulled it and they changed the story. And not to mention, one of the biggest Sky News editor is a Zionist. Like her political influence has had an impact on that. And that wasn't just Sky News. The entire mainstream media acted like a bunch of right wingers on Twitter, just pushing out misinformation. So the mainstream media has really changed. So I think that's where I get to the point about like regulation, stuff like that is becoming far less effective, because we're even seeing the mainstream media go into the conspiracy rabbit hole. And what the mainstream media does is kind of follow where the wind is blowing. And the power is with social media and the billionaire owners. They're driving the stories and the mainstream media is responding to that, but they're not critiquing it. They're just following it. So I think that is a very good point from Jay, that it's not like, okay, the mainstream media is bad, but at least we have some sort of standards. In fact, we're having far less standards. Look at GB News, for God's sake. They just peddle misinformation.
They just got fined.
Sorry?
They just got fined a couple of weeks ago. Do you remember?
Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't mean anything. Who cares? They're carrying on. So it's
Well, they're going to carry on because the fines aren't big enough. That's the problem. I remember I used to listen to this podcast with this tech journalist called Kara Swisher. She's very famous in the UK, in the US. She's been following tech companies for years, and she says the fundamental problem with any tech company is that even if you fine them $2 billion, which Facebook has been fined that at some point, it's 6 weeks' income. That's it. It's 6 weeks' income. They'd rather keep that money, but it's not going to stop them. And that's the problem. This is where the fines have to be huge. They have to be big, because then people will be incentivized to actually work with the truth and not against it. If we've got any more comments, if not, I can move on to ending the show. Anything else? Sorry for the lack of professionalism around the comments, guys.
Gary Garner, I have a dream where the left and right unite. If the right tries,
actually, this is really interesting. Actually, I can talk on this for a second. So I don't know if you've seen, but in the last day or two, AOC Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez posted on her Instagram, and basically she got all the data for her district, and she found that hundreds of people voted for her and Trump. And she did a video wanting to reach out to talk to these people to understand why. But obviously, as well, if we go back to 2016, we've got Bernie. We had hundreds of thousands of people who shifted from Bernie Sanders, the biggest left wing candidate in America, well, mainstream anyway, to voting for Trump. And I feel like there is some weird thing there that we need to talk about. I wish we even had more time for it, because I wanted to get on to how do we move forward, and we can maybe talk about this just for 2 minutes before we have to go. Is that one analysis that I saw is that if you take AOC, Trump, and Bernie Sanders, the one thing that they've got is they are consistent and they seem to be outside of the establishment. AOC's constantly going against the Democratic Party. Bernie's always done his own thing. You can watch a speech from Bernie Sanders in the 1970s and he is the same person with the same principles. And despite all of his faults, even though I don't think he is consistent, people see Trump as consistent, but they also see him outside of the political sphere. They see him as a non-politician. And that's something that all these three candidates have in common. And the fact that we have voters jumping from voting AOC and Trump, Bernie voters going to Trump, there's something there. There is something there that needs to be looked at and needs to be talked about and needs to be thought out a little bit more.
The mind of the medium voter scares me, but yeah, but I mean that's more about political campaigns, though, because neither side have compromised with the other. They were just very clear in their messaging, and also they spoke about class-based politics and the issues, and that's obviously very good, which I think the Democrats should do. But obviously, whether that translates into media people uniting with the right, I mean, how are we going to unite with the right when the right say trans people shouldn't exist? I mean, it's going to be very difficult. I mean, I'm happy to sit down and have a conversation with someone, a serious conversation with the right wing, and discuss the issues. And I'm finding them hard to find, but
the point that I'm not getting at is uniting with the right. The point that I'm getting at is that there are voters out there who are going after the person because of their consistency, because of their stances, and because this idea that they're outside of the swamp, outside of the sphere, despite criticisms of that. And I feel like there is something there, and it just goes to show that if we actually put the right candidates forward on our side, which is a struggle and a battle, that there's so much ground to be won. Because people, even though I'm not happy that 75 million people have voted for Trump, who's going to do all this crazy shit, but a huge chunk of those voters have the potential. Sorry, my cat is crying outside my door, so if anybody can hear that, I do apologize. But there is a potential there where people are just looking for a good candidate rather than policy, which is an issue in itself, but can be taken advantage of if we can get a good candidate with good policy who can reach a wider audience. Because I think what the voting shows that people aren't necessarily voting for Trump because of his policies. They just want somebody who is different.
Yeah.
And I think we can take advantage of that, but not by using terrible populism and fascism.
Yeah, no, I got nothing more to comment on that.
Okay.
You're absolutely right.
Anyway, sorry for the little messes in today's show. Sorry for my cat crying outside. Sorry for me having to leave to open the door because I left my key in the door and locked my partner out in the cold. But that is the end of of tonight's show. So thank you to everyone who joined in. And of course, thank you, Curtis, for being a great guest. I always love our discussions because we don't think the same, and that's what we need. We need a bit of diversity in thought. But remember, if you haven't already, then like the stream. It helps with the algorithm and all that fun stuff. If you want to see us grow, then you can donate to us by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, and you can support us there either monthly or with a one-off donation and help us become a full-time media organization, which is my dream. I'm Lewis, and see you next time.
Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.